To that end, though, stupid jerk, who in Discord has been anything but a stupid jerk, in my opinion. This is probably a bit too deep into Galaxy Brain territory, but does a Super Bowl plus Stanley Cup win change anything about the Kroenke salary budgeting for the Nuggets, positive or negative? So he had Stupid Jerk had asked this question before the Nuggets went and did everything in the offseason, basically. We had stashed this question, so it's even more timely now. I don't know if it'll have any sort of impact. I will say, if anything, it should embolden them to be like, yo, we can do this. Granted, one of the markets they won in was Los Angeles. It's a little bit different. That being said, they're in the tax right now. They're 11 million. I have them as $11 million into the tax, give or take, like whatever. These salary spreadsheets are all different. That being said, there's still time for them to get out of it if things go wrong. They've never really skimped on their own talent. They extended Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. rather than letting those guys hit restricted free agency. They just gave the Supermax to Nikola Jokic. And then when I really thought they weren't going to use their mini MLE, that Bruce Brown signing, hell fucking yeah, probably the best signing of the offseason. I would say what has happened for the Kroenkes should embolden them to keep spending now. And will it change the way that they view executives as maybe interchangeable? We'll see. Probably not, knowing them, but it absolutely should motivate them to continue spending on the roster, which, again, to give them some credit, they've basically always done. We have to see, though, and we have to see whether they can still duck the tax this upcoming year, is what I'm saying. But if the Nuggets are a contender or even a really good team, like if you're fourth in the West and you envision, if everything goes right and we're healthy in the playoffs, we can win, then you should still remain in the tax at the end of next season. And I expect that even if they hadn't won a Stanley Cup and a Super Bowl, that's exactly what they would have done. So again, they ducked the tax this past year, I believe, because of I should have looked into that more. But yeah, they ducked the tax last year with that sort of trade, maybe, unless I'm missing something here. But anyway, let's just carry on. That they did go that route, but because of when that trade was completed is what I mean. However, I would be shocked at this point. The Nuggets, if they're good, I don't expect them to get out of the tax now, even though they should be around $11 million in. Like that takes, that's going to take a lot for them to get out of. You're talking about dumping. I guess you could still theoretically do it if it's like, okay, maybe Bruce Brown isn't working out and we have Ish Smith's expiring contract. Okay, gone. Like, I guess you could go that way if things go wrong. I would expect them to stay in it, though. That is, I feel like that might be a compliment. Is it too strong of a compliment? Who knows? Hernspo from Discord asks, is Denver considered a contender? What are they planning to do while having one of the best in the league? Are they planning? I want to check and make sure that I didn't misread that at all. I would view them as a contender if they're healthy. I think that's a big if with Michael Porter Jr.'s back. I'm less worried about Jamal Murray, not just because we know he's this workaholic, but he has been a tough dude. ACL injuries are just not the career enders they used to be. And even when he had his best moments on offense, are you worried he's going to lose some of his stop and pop pizzazz? I suppose. But even when he had his best moments on defense, he was never just prided on being super explosive. It was just super tough and stout. I'd be more worried about the drop off on offense, to be honest with you. I guess you could worry about it on defense for sure, because peak Jamal Murray is steamrolling people, going through screens or just making really smart decisions and getting in front of people and just staying with them. So again, I think he's going to be fine. And if he's fine, I think that's more so the key than Michael Porter Jr., who, the way your roster is built right now, feels like you could essentially live without. You should be able to get enough shot creation all around without him. I guess by getting rid of Monte Morris and Will Barton, you've kind of hurt yourself there. You're in a shot creation deficit. So yeah, I guess you can argue Michael Porter Jr. is more important unless you want to see more ball skills with Aaron Gordon. I'm a big believer in Bones Highland, though. And that's someone who I think can pick up a ton of the slack. So even if Michael Porter Jr. can't be counted on, I would still call the Nuggets a contender. It's if Jamal Murray just doesn't come all the way back, I would be concerned. And do I think that the Nuggets have done enough to maximize Jokic's window? I would say for the most part, yeah, they seem to be straddling sort of these semi-cash conscious lines. But again, the Monte Morris trade just made all kinds of sense for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and what he can do for you at the point of attack. And you did go out and again sign Bruce Brown. We'll see if his 3-point shot holds from last season. Uh, I just I view them absolutely as a contender. I can't assume that they're going to be fully healthy, but I also just can't be like, well, we have to say that Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. are going to miss like 40 games each. We can't go that route either. So I view them as a contender. If all goes right for them, they could be the team to pick in the West. And I'm just not even kidding. The question is, if you're close, are you willing? Yeah, you've traded, and they've also traded like first round draft equity. They could technically trade a 2029 first round pick. If they, technically it would have to convey immediately and then turn into nothing because that protected first in 2027 to OKC could spill over into 2028 and 2029, I believe. But you could trade a first round pick. It's if you're close, are you willing to go the extra mile to get what your roster is missing? I don't know what that missing piece necessarily would be at this point without playing out the season. They seem like they have probably the most well-balanced roster they've ever ascended around Nikola Jokic. I really would have liked to have seen what they looked like when they traded for Aaron Gordon in 2020, 2021 first before the Jamal Murray injury. But this is certainly, to me, just looking at them on paper, the closest that they've come to having just full comprehensive coverage. Like, again, maybe if you don't believe Bones Hyland can handle it or Michael Porter Jr. is going to be in and out of the lineup or just not as good because he was bad before he even left for the season, but he was dealing with the back stuff before that. Maybe there's a shot creation deficit a little bit. Are you worried about the bench rotation in general? What if Bones Hyland doesn't pan out? Like, who are you leaning on for that? And then the backup big man rotation, like you're going to be leaning on DeAndre Jordan, Zeke Naji, and Jeff Green again. Is that there's some instability there? If you're able to make those upgrades, are you willing to give up an asset to get it done? And maybe that asset is a Zeke Naji. Like, what if it's going after Kenrich Williams and it's going to cost you Zeke Naji? I don't even know if, again, you have Bruce Brown and KCP. Does that even make sense? Is it making, look, if maybe this season's going swell, the Nuggets are 4-5 in the West, but Kevin Durant hasn't been traded and they have an opportunity to get him. And you're putting like all your chips on the table, being maybe Michael Porter Jr. is having a fantastic year. Are you willing to make that bold of a leap? There's still that question. And that's like the least likely scenario. That's actually really a terrible example. But are you willing to make like smaller end moves depending on how the season plays out that is going to cost you more assets? I personally wouldn't trade Bones Hyland unless it's in a blockbuster. But again, Zeke Naji being the example. Is it pivoting to like even moving Aaron Gordon? Are you willing to shake it up? Look, let's phrase it this way. You want to shake it up beyond the Jokic Murray core right now, because those are still the most untouchable players on your roster. And I would still view Murray as more untouchable than not, especially now because his value isn't going to be especially high. And you typically aren't going to find teams of what should be the Nuggets caliber making those like wild turnover moves in the middle of the year. That's like more off-season oriented. So I'm looking more not on the margins, but someone who could be. The best way to phrase it is what the Celtics did this year. I'm all over the place. I'm sorry. I have been thinking about this question, though. They went after Derek White, and they gave up real stuff to do it. If that missing piece, or who you view as that missing piece, becomes available, are you willing to go after it to that extent? In the Nuggets case, it's a little bit different just because they can't trade a first-round pick to 2029. But the Celtics did give up a 2028 top one protected swap in their deal. So are you willing to make a move like that? That would be the only question you have to be, in my mind, when you look at just Nikola Jokic. Is like one of the 5 best players in the league. But I do think the Nuggets are a contender. How's that for just sort of a roundabout way of getting there?